Good afternoon, everybody. So yesterday when I was working on getting one of my new Genius controllers up and running, I made a little bit of an oops and messed up the network settings on my FPP or Falcon Player, which is the brains of my show. So when I was resetting it up, I thought, well, this would be a good video to make. I haven't seen one recently. They are on version 6.3 now. So I thought I'd make a video, try and fill a gap, and we'll see how it goes. So what do you need to set up Falcon Player or FPP? Well, you need a Raspberry Pi. I believe now you can actually put it on Linux machines or Ubuntu machines, but for my purposes, the Raspberry Pi is small, fits in a nice little area. So I have a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus that I will be using, and this one does have Wi-Fi. This one's brand new. I got it from Wired Watts, and it was a decent price. He actually has that set up really well to avoid bots buying them all up. But from what I hear, the Raspberry Pi logistics are improving. They figure they'll be good next month. You also need an SD card. Typically, I use a 32 gig SD card. For the purposes of this video, I will be using, I believe it is a 16 gig. You'll also need an SD card reader, a power cable, and a network cable. And if you don't have that stuff, I'll put some affiliate links down below for Amazon, and I'll put some of the vendors that I go to in the description down below. Software side, well, the first thing that we are going to have to go do is, let's open up a different browser window. First off, we are going to need software called Raspberry Pi Imager. So I already have it downloaded, but I will show where the link is. Raspberry Pi Imager from GitHub. So we are going to want the latest version, which is 1. We'll just click on that. And this is the file we're going to want right here. Next thing we're going to want, there is 2 ways to image this onto your SD card. If you're going to do it manually, you will need the FPP image. Now we'll jump into here. Actually, I wanted to go into the releases. So 6.3 is the latest release. If you come into their GitHub page, which these 2 pages I'll put in the description below, it tells you all the enhancements. And as you can see here, it does support Ubuntu 20. There is a 7.0 in alpha. I will not be using that today. I just don't have the time to do the beta testing. So when you come down, well, we'll click on the version we want. When you come down here to select your assets, you're going to want the FPP version 6. You will download this file, you will unzip it, and in that folder will be an image file. And that you can use with like Bela Etcher or Raspberry Pi, any type of imaging software that you may use for your SD cards. My preferred way now is the Raspberry Pi Imager, and I will show you why. We'll get this opened up. If you're going to use this and use the image file, you would just go to use a custom and choose your image file. You can see I actually do have the image file here. But the developers of FPP got the software into the Raspberry Pi Imager. So if we come up to the other specific purpose OS, scroll all the way to the bottom, we'll see we have FPP down here. Now, there are only 3 versions on here, 6.3, 6.2, and 6.11. So I know some people out there like to use the older versions. They're more baked in. So if you want to use anything before 6.1.1, you're going to have to do it manually. For our purposes today, we are going to use 6.3. I am going to choose my SD card. Oh, this one is a 32 gig. Nice. And we are going to write it. And we're going to say yes here. Now this should take about 5 minutes. It's going to write, then it's going to verify. So we'll be back in about 5 minutes. All right, and we are back. And as you can see, it is written to the SD card. So we'll just okay that, close out of that. Now I'm going to take the SD card out and put it into my Raspberry Pi. I do not have a camera set up in here currently to show the physical aspect of this, but the more important side is the actual computer aspect. So I am Starting off, you have to start off with your network cable and getting some power, and it is booting up. So one thing we are going to have to do to find the IP, because right now we don't know what it's going to be, it'll be DHCP. We're going to have to go to our router. I use Unify. Your mileage may vary. Each router has a different login, password, a different way to get at the devices that are on it, so you may have to contact your ISP or look in your router's manual if you do not know how to do it. All routers will have an area where it has connected devices on it, which is where we just came to on mine. And it looks like we are still loading up here. It hasn't popped in yet. We'll just refresh and wait for it to come in. You can see I have a lot of home automation on it. We're going to try this one right here. This might be the one I did yesterday though. So 192, all right, this is the one. So it gave me the same IP as what the original did yesterday. So we have some initial setup to do first. We have to set our FPP player mode. So there's two modes, player and remote. So in this case, this FPP is one of my masters, so it will be a player, but there are two FPP instances for my projector that take commands from this master. So the master would be the player, those two that are taking commands from it would be the remote. I'm going to put my host name just so I can remember what there is. I used to have a bunch of Culp controllers, so I had several, I think I had about 5 or 6 different FPP instances as Culp uses FPP. Those are getting upgraded, so I'll only have 3 instances now. Host description, you can just put in more of a description of what you want. And the nice thing about FPP now is the developers have put in little descriptions of what everything is for too. So if you have any questions, you can read this. Share statistics. So this will put different statistics up on your banner, which is up here, which would be your temperature, your Ethernet time, what the player is doing, and any other statistics that are going to come up. I like them for the banner. You can turn them off. Share crash data with the developers. I always do that. The developers do a lot of good work, so giving them more info to improve things is always good. But you also can disable this, and you can change what is sent to them. Being that you can add capes and hats to the Raspberry Pi, you can fetch logos from the vendors, and you can send serial numbers to the vendors. I don't use capes or hats, especially on this one, so I'm just going to turn those off. And obviously, I don't have a cape or a hat, so I'm going to put none, but there are some options here of different ones that are pre-built into here. If you're for locale, if you're in Canada, you would select Canada. If you're in USA, you would select USA. If you're anywhere else in the world, you would select global. I am in the USA. Now, for time zone, you can either come and search for your time zone, or you can press the little look up time zone button, and let's see how well it works. Works perfect. Now, this latitude and longitude, this is going to show me in Colorado, which is inaccurate. You can also look at the map to see where you're at. So, hit the look up location button, and it changes your location. This is within 50 miles of where I am. Two important things, which I learned about last year the hard way. UI password and OS password. You have to choose options for these. So the UI password, I do not need a password on my UI. It's not that important to me. OS password, you don't have an option to disable. So you can either use your own custom, or you can use the default one, which is Falcon. I'm just going to set it to Falcon because if I use a custom, I'm going to forget. And with that, we will hit Finish Setup. And now, as you can see, our base configuration changed when we did the setup, so there's a reboot that needs to happen. We can do this here first. So this SD card right now, it just has the FPP image on it, so doesn't have a petition to use the full SD card, which you are going to want, which once you start loading in video files, audio files, scripts, sequence files. So we are going to go to the storage settings as it requests, and we are going to hit Grow File System. And just really quick, as you can see right now with the image, that's the file system or the space that you have currently on a 32 gig chip. So let's hit the Grow File System. A reboot will be needed, which we got to do one anyway. So we do wish to proceed. hit yes, and we'll let it do its thing. And it did its thing that quick. Sometimes it's quick, sometimes it's not. We will hit close, and we will go to the reboot right away. And we want to hit yes. Now the reboots do take a couple minutes. They are not too bad. I think we're going to have probably one reboot left, because our next step is going to be, our next major step is going to be networking. Well, jumped the gun a little early there. Now we are back after the reboot, so really quickly before we jump into the networking, as long as we're on the FPP settings screen, we might as well buzz through these really quick. Playback menu. You can set up that it turns off all lights in between sequences, which I do not do because in between sequences or in between show or playlist, I do run a background kind of a static, so I do not run a blank between sequences. Depending how I build in my static, I do want background effects to pause during FSE. And if we just go here and read more of a description on that, background effects normally continue to run when a sequence is playing. This setting instructs FPP to pause all background effects when a sequence is running. When the sequence stops, the background effects resume playback. Depending on what I'm doing, I may use this feature, the background effects, but I also do create kind of a stat sequence file. And that takes a little bit of tricky setting up in the scheduler. Audio and video, I do use the onboard audio. I have a Sound Blaster USB audio card, so that's going to end up being here. My default output device is HDMI. I do not use an audio mixer, so everything there is good for the most part. Time, one thing we want to do, which I prefer to do, you can use your real-time clock. You can set your own date and time. Time zone's already set, but I set up an NTP server on all of my Pis just because if they're not in sync time-wise, your show is not in sync, you're going to have issues. So what I do is I run over here, I type in NTP server IP, and I grab an NTP server. And that is Network Time Protocol. We put that in, and we are good to go. It is saved. For UI, there are different user interface levels, so you can go basic, advanced, experimental, and developer. If you're watching this video and this is your first time, you probably for sure do not want experimental and developer. Basic should just be fine for you. Advanced gives you a few more features, and I typically do advanced. And you can read more about what each feature has. You can display all hardware options and settings. That's for your capes and hats, and then here's your time and date format. I do change my temperature units to Fahrenheit because I'm a heathen from the US. And then my header background, I do have a different header background for each color, and my master is red. Again, if you wanted to change that UI password, right here it is in the UI. You can set up an email server on here. I do not do that. You can set up an MQTT broker to work with Home Assistant. I currently do not do that. I have Casa plugs that I use with my home automation to turn off controller. You can reset your stuff here. So this is what we saw in that initial setup. So if you ever wanted to change it, here's where you could go. Input, output control. I never play in here. You can go through and look to see exactly what they do. Then you have logging, so you can choose what your logs bring, how they alarm, etc. Here's that storage screen we were just on. Now you see that that file system is 28.7 gig and we have 24.6 free for file. And then system, and this again is a lot of the stuff we saw at the initial startup. On my projector Pis, I do use this Force HDMI display. I do have the status display off. I do not use multi-sync. And then you got your latitude and longitude, and here's where your OS password is if you ever wanted to change it. Most of the things you change in FPP are going to require a restart, so we're just going to do that. This is pretty quick. As you can see in the corner here, it's done. So now we are going to zip over to network. We are going to save and set up our network settings. This is a Raspberry Pi that has Ethernet and wireless. We are going to set them all up. Right now, currently, I do use wireless, but I am working on getting network drops to my controller location. Wireless is not preferred for a show. so I will be moving to Ethernet. My Wi-Fi driver is going to be external. You also can choose Linux kernel, but Linux external works. And this is only available on Wi-Fi enabled Raspberry Pis. So I believe the 3B and the 3 do not have Wi-Fi capability. I set all my stuff up for a static IP, not DHC. So my static IP will be 1 and 2. So my show starts at 110 for the IP and goes up from there. Once you type in your IP, it is automatically going to bring in a net mask and a gateway. You want to check with your router and everything just to make sure. And then we will ping this to make sure we are actually talking and things are working. Oddly, for some reason, this is not working. Try this. So we can talk to the gateway, which is the router. Obviously, okay, right now it's trying to ping what the current IP, and we are changing it. So yes, that's not going to work. So we're going to save the user interface, and it's going to remind us to set our DNS. Now we'll ping the new Pi address. We'll try that back when we come back to it. Next, we want to go to our DNS server, and that would be 8 and 1 and these are Google DNS servers, so we'll just ping them to make sure we can talk to them. And so far we can. And we'll update DNS. Now you see here, it wants us to reboot. Before we reboot, we're actually going to go over to LAN and do the same thing, set up the static. Now I do not use LAN and Wi-Fi at the same time. I used to when I first started and was using a Falcon controller. I had the Wi-Fi that connected to the home network, and I had a separate network between the FPP and the controller. I'm not doing that. I'll be doing switching this time. So we'll let all of that come. We got to put our Wi-Fi information in. There that is. We will update the interface again. Really quickly for good measure, we'll just... Okay, we can talk to the gateway. We'll try this again for the hell of it. And we'll do the reboot. And again, the reboot's going to take a couple minutes. Get LastPass off the screen. Alright, so now this IP is not going to work anymore. I am going to unplug my Ethernet cable, and we'll start trying the new IP. It works. So now we are set up on the new network. Right now I'm going to run it off of the Wi-Fi, and we're going to kind of drive on and go through some of the menu options here. Really quick to point out, so your banner up here, you'll notice you have a player status, so right now it's idle. You have your CPU speed, temperature for the Pi. You have the IP that you're using. Now, if I had the wireless cable plugged in, if I had the Ethernet cable plugged in, it would have both IPs here. I can't do that based on they're the same IP. I would get an IP conflict and have an issue. And then you've got date and time. So if we go to status control, first we have our status page. We will enable stats, and it's going to want us to restart. We'll just do that really quick. And we have our player status again down here. So here's where you can choose playlists or sequences to play. Then you have your play, previous, next, stop graceful, and we'll go over these once I get some data in here. This volume control is on the fly, and I'd like to use that feature. If somebody in their vehicle has the volume too loud for the neighbors, I can go down and change the volume on them. This does have to be tuned to the volume on the FM transmitter also. We were just in network, multi-sync. Right now I've got Genius controller out there, and I do have the other Pi. So this will show what this Pi will be talking to. We were in FPP Settings, FPP Backup. Here's where you can back up your configuration in case you do something stupid like I did and basically nuke my network settings on the old Pi. Then you can re-upload your configurations. I'll do this a little later. Proxy settings. I've never used proxy settings. Don't have a proxy. Command presets, never used it. Effects, this is where you could have those background effects, so you would have to set those up in Xlights and then have those imported here. And then display testing, which for this master Pi, display testing is not applicable because it does not have any pixels out there. I do that directly on the controller. Let's go to the fun area. Under content setup, the first thing we have is the file manager. So this is where all your files are going to be stored. You have your sequence files, audio files, video files, any images, effects, scripts, logs, uploads, and crash reports. So these two are good if you run into some issues. If you have errors or whatever and you go into the Zoom room, you can show logs and crash reports. And then everything here is stored separately. You can obviously drag and drop in manually, but nice thing is Xlights does most of that for us. Playlist, here's where you can create your playlist and add sequences and music to it. I usually run 3 playlists during Christmas and 1 for Halloween. And then I have just some static random ones and test ones that I'll be putting on throughout the year. Scheduler. This scheduler for FPP is very powerful and it really warrants its own video. On the basic level, you can just create a basic schedule that, all right, this is the days you want it to run, your start date and end date. Do you want it to run every day, just one day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday? They give you a lot of leeway here to change your show. And my show actually runs, I have one of the playlists runs Monday, Wednesday, Friday, one is Tuesday, Thursday, and then the last one is Saturday and Sunday. Saturday and Sunday for my show are usually more of a kids' night. You can set your start time, then what kind of playlist you want. So you can do the playlist that I showed you. You can just run a simple sequence. So like during the summer and the off season for the 4th of July, I'll run just a simple sequence that'll light up the house outline. And you can put in different commands, and the different commands are a very powerful tool. You can turn on, if you have the right downloads, you can turn on and off projectors, you can stop things, run different scripts, ton of different options. And again, this is a totally different video. And then you can set your stop time here. You can set your stop type. So graceful is it will stop when the song ends, the current song. Graceful loop will stop when the current playlist is done. Hard stop is it'll stop right now. I typically use a graceful when I'm for the end of the show. And then you have your end time, and then if you want it to repeat. What I usually do is set my show for 30 minutes long, and then I repeat it every 60 minutes. So it runs on the top of the hour, on the hour. You can also disable your scheduler if you want to use Xlights scheduler. We do have a script repository, so you can download more scripts and use them for those commands. They are very powerful, and it's more of an advanced type thing. I do have some of them that I use, and that's with the projectors, but that actually comes with a plugin. The plugin manager is really the fun part of all of this. So there's a ton of different plugins. You can set up different GPIO pins and have big buttons for people to press to start the show. You can do brightness control during your show, so it's on the fly brightness control. You can set up your audio in here. You can have an arcade on your overlay models or your matrix. You can set this up with Home Assistant. You can have matrix tools along with a couple other plugins where people can text message to your matrix, or you can show the weather or time on your matrix. So there's a lot of power in this. The developers have really thought it through. One of the big things that I do use, which would be another video again, is Remote Falcon, which is a plugin where you can have a website for your show and your viewers can go to the website, get information on the show. If you have donations set up, you can advertise that there. Different advertisements, hours, etc. But then they can also go in, and this will either act like a jukebox where they can choose to play a song and you can control when the song plays, or they can do it as vote for a song. So you got 20 people outside, everybody votes off of your playlist, and that'll play next. And you can, like I said, control when that'll play. So it can cut off the current song and play the request, or you can have it finish the song, play the request, and then restart back into your playlist. Next up, we have channel inputs and the input-output setup. This is where things come in. So in my case, this is the master, so nothing's really coming in. I will upload from Xlights. But if this was one of the remotes, this would have inputs for talking to and from the master. Channel outputs. This is where the master will output to the different controllers or other Pis, etc., whatever it's going to send data to. If you had a cape or a hat on here, here's where you would get your pixel strings. If you are running P5 or P10 panels, you can set this up in here to work with color light or a cape hat, whichever you're doing, and this is where you set up your P10 panels. And then other outputs. Output processors I have never used. I'm sure there are advanced users that use them. I won't talk about them. Pixel overlay models. So when I upload my sequences, it's going to upload and automatically create pixel overlay models. I had an issue last year, and it took us probably about 2 hours in a Zoom room to figure it out. I had an issue where I uploaded overlay models and FPP automatically created them. So there were some models on there that were duplicated that were acting really weird, and the channels were off. So I do turn this off now and save. And finally, we have the GPIO inputs, so you can set up buttons, motion sensors. The sky is kind of the limit with this, to the GPIO, and you can program this in and in the scheduler to do different things. So if somebody pulls up to your house, you can have a motion sensor that the show starts. This is where you would probably be setting up big buttons. So if you had a pedestal with buttons to start the show, that's where you would be putting this. And lastly, we have the help menu, which I will actually start with the bottom. I want to say that the FPP developers are a great team. They're constantly working to make this better, and it is, for the most part, a free software. So donating to FPP always helps. It always gives them the extra funds to improve, add features, add capabilities and connectivity to it. I don't use any of these. I don't use this stuff. This is all more advanced. Help index gets you to some help files. The forums, there's a ton of good forums with a lot of information and knowledge on them. And that would include the Xlights Zoom room at xlights.org. FPP manual is absolutely a must. So we're going over an overview. All of the features that sit in Xlights and the scheduling is in the manual to learn how to do. And lastly, the about. This one's pretty important. This gives you all the information, but this is where you can update your FPP. Now, I just loaded the latest version, so I'm not sure why it's telling me an update's available. I'm not going to mess with that, but later on in the year, as probably around September, August, I will do a final update, and then I do not update till the next spring when I start playing around. As I mentioned, Xlights does upload almost everything to FPP for you, so let's just open up Xlights quick. And I'm still on 7 of 2023. I know there's an update out there, but I just haven't gotten around to actually updating. Alright, I got an issue with the controller yet, but that'll be the next controller video that I do. So I'm going to skip here. I am actually going to open up right away. This is a master. It is not a controller, so it's not set up here. Once you get your sequence all set up and everything built in here properly, which right now I'm just at a test phase, you are going to want to go to FPP Connect, and this is where you're going to upload your sequences and data to FPP. It's going to look for the different instances, so it should automatically find my master, which it did. We are not going to send out models, but I am going to send UDP data. And then the test file that I have right now to send the data is this Top Gun one, Top Gun test. At this point, it's just simple. You press upload, but if you do not find your FPP there, you can go to add and type in your IP address and it should pop up. So we're going to upload that, and then we're going to go back through and we're going to look at the FPP screen and see what's changed. You can see channel inputs have not changed for this because it is a master, but you will see the channel outputs change. So now it has put in all the projectors that all the controllers or Pis that this is going to talk to, their IP address, and what output type it is. I am currently switching to DDP, so as I replace this controller, it will be DDP. This controller will become DDP, and then these two will get set for DDP. And this is all your information that is built into Xlights. If you did not want to resend this again, you would turn off. Let me jump in there. You don't need to resend this every time. Once you got everything locked in and you're starting your sequencing, you would send this once and then I would turn it off. So that way you're not taking the risk of something accidentally changing. And now this is a carbon copy of what is in Xlights. So if everything is wired correctly and Xlights is set up correctly, what's on your house or on your test bench should mimic what is playing in Xlights, or what would play in Xlights. We'll come to the file manager, see what's changed here. As we can see, we have the Top Gun test. And then if we come to status control, you see we can choose the Top Gun test FSE and we can play it. And right now that is playing on the Genius controller that I have set up. So everything is running the way I expect right now. I do not have music for this. So this was a quick and dirty afternoon tutorial on how to set up Falcon Pi Player or FPP. The next one I'm going to do kind of an overview of the Genius controller that I have, and then kind of how I got everything set up in Xlights so this would talk to the controller and that would talk and make blinky flashy. Thanks for staying tuned. Thanks for being here with me. If you found this at all useful, give me a like and subscribe, please. Again, I will put the links down in the description, and I will have more videos coming out as the year starts going on. So if you want to get notified, hit the little bell icon, and everybody have a great afternoon. Thank you.